Hello and welcome everybody. Today I want to introduce you to a build I've wanted to make ever since my first Animate Weapon build in Lake of Kalandra, Ranged Chaos Animate Weapon Necromancer. Back in the day, you had to equip Spirit Guards and animate ranged weapons from the ground, which wasn't really feasible, but with the introduction of Animate Weapon of Ranged Arms in 3.23, this is no longer necessary. Its strengths are its long duration, decent minion survivability, amazing single target damage, and unlike the melee version, it also has great clear. The only drawbacks are the 2-button playstyle and the weapons despawning on loading screens, including death. The build can be played from League start to the endgame, although we have to wait until Act 3 to use Animate Weapon, at least in a League start scenario, because Ethereal Knives no longer generates lingering blades. However, it's actually better to use a different ability until you can access Unleash support at the end of Act 4, because it speeds up the summoning process remarkably. I personally recommend Absolution because it's available at the end of Act 1 and pretty much guarantees a smooth leveling experience. I also left a passive tree progression and a skill guide for the campaign in the low-budget PoE for players that are unfamiliar with minion builds. The ranged version is a transfigured gem that you can get in the lab or buy from trade, which is what I did on League Start. It was 2 chaos at the time, so even when leveling, the transfigured gem is very accessible. Before that, you'll have to make do with the melee version. The ascendancies of choice are the Necromancer to boost minion damage and player survivability via Mistress of Sacrifice with Bone Offering, and the Primalist for the charms. You want to play the Chaos hit-based over the Poison version to eliminate Ramp, which increases dynamic DPS while bossing and mapping, because dot-based damage, like Poison, cannot be scaled beyond 35.8 million DPS due to the in-game limits that are hard-coded into the game. The League Start setup features inexpensive uniques and rares with life, stats, and resistances. The Convoking one should be rolled with Deafening Essences of Fear for minion damage, and the shield should be Shaper influenced with percentage life recovery on block. For the Anoint on the Amulet, you want to go with Decay Ward because it increases minion survivability and is pretty cheap, even on League Start. The build can be scaled further by introducing uniques like Severed in Sleep, which gives you access to Envy and Withered, Aegis Aurora for energy shield recovery on block, a 4-white socket Tri-Grip for Fist to Chaos conversion, and Dendrobate for the chance to poison support. While Lion Eyes Vision is technically better for DPS, it's a pure armor base, so the 3 green and 3 blue sockets we need for this build aren't native, and thus acquiring that chest with the proper socket colors would blow the budget out of proportion. The recommended charms are a Guardian Charm for Onslaught and a Necromancer Charm for Offering effect to get block capped. For the flasks, you want to go with a Life Flask that removes bleeding, Roomies for armor and block chance, a Quicksilver Flask for increased movement speed, a Quartz Flask with increased armor for phasing, and an Amethyst Flask with a proper suffix for chaos resistance. For the jewels, you should mostly use Ghastly Eye jewels with added physical and chaos damage because Animate Weapon scales well with it. For the Spectres, you want to use a Carnage and a Host Chieftain for the charges, and then an Arena Master for the buff. For the Animate Guardian, I recommend a set of cheap uniques like Relentless Fury for Culling Strike, Learcast for increased minion damage, Wake of Destruction for Shock Ground, Rare Hunter Influence Gloves with Intimidate on hit, Xandathis' Cassock to Chaos Cap the Guardian, which in combination with Broken Faith also allows your Guardian to create Profane Ground on block, scaling your damage further. In the medium budget, we're switching to a pure energy shield base with CIs, so we no longer have to worry about chaos resistance, which frees up a bunch of modifiers on our items. You also want to start using a large minion cluster with increased effect, minion attack and cast speed, as well as energy shield to boost damage and player survivability. In addition to that, you need a medium cluster with Feasting Fiends for leech and Life from Death for minion life recovery on minion death, which prevents cascade failure and allows you to actively heal your minions by animating new weapons when you are at max weapon count. Since CI eliminates chaos damage and Divine Shield mitigates the impact of physical damage, this leaves only elemental damage to worry about. To deal with that, we're using Graven's Secret, which transforms the power charges from the host chieftain into absorption charges, which allows it to recoup 12% of elemental damage as energy shield per absorption charge. In general, you want to use items with lots of energy shield, resistances, and attributes. Noteworthy mentions include the Skin of the Loyal for increased global defenses, optimally with a Corrupt Implicit for +3 socketed minion or duration gems, a proper Hubris Circlet with +2 minion levels, and Ashes of the Stars because the quality scales skill gems like Bone Offering and Animate Weapon. The flasks are pretty similar to the low budget. Main differences are a Bismuth flask to overcap resistances and a Basalt flask for even more armor. The recommended charms are similar to the ones before, including one with reservation efficiency, and they should in general have energy shield regen as a secondary modifier. The fourth Spectre you should now use is one of the new ones, the Perfect Hulking Miscreation, which gives you minions increased damage and attack speed. The Animate Guardian now uses a shield that can inflict brittle on block, and Gravebind plus an Explodey chest, which increases clear speed further. In the high budget, you want to get an additional minion cluster that also has a fourth modifier like resistances or attributes, and a mana reservation efficiency small cluster with increased passive effect, energy shield, and stats or resistances. This, in combination with better implicits and an explicit mana reservation efficiency modifier on the helmet, allows you to fit the last aura, Haste. The gear in general is similar to the medium budget, but includes better rolled items, for example a proper minion shield and double energy shield jewelry. I've made crafting guides for those items that can be found in the crafting guide playlist in the description of this video and on my channel page. Depending on the focus of your build, you might want to go from a chest with 3 green and 3 blue sockets to one with 4 blue and 2 green sockets. The former is optimal for mapping, whereas the latter is better for bossing because it allows you to use generic damage support gems like critical damage and critical strikes, which also supports the melee weapons you animate with the Val version of the skill gem. You optimally want a Skin the Loyal with +2 socketed minion and duration gems, but those are pretty rare. You could alternatively get an Incandescent Heart with the same Corrupt Implicits, which provides better defenses against elemental damage, but is worse against physical damage and lacks the +1 levels from the explicit modifier. For the flasks, you want to get Bottled Faith instead of the Bismuth flask for regen and increased damage taken, and a specific elemental resistance flask that matches the main damage type of the boss, so Sapphire for Maven, Shaper, Elder, Cortex, Topaz for Ether, and Ruby for Exarch and Cyrus. For the Spectres, you want to replace the Host Chieftain with a Pale Seraphim because ranged animate weapon attacks rapidly and can thus generate power charges from Assassin's Mark. For the AG, you want to go with the Kingmaker for Culling Strike, Crit Multi, and Fortify, a Crown of the Tyrant with a white socket for chaos damage and minus resistances, and last but not least Gravebind, and a double influenced chest for explosions and regen for the Animate Guardian. I've made a short crafting guide video for a chest like that, which can be found in the crafting aid playlist as well. I think that's pretty much it for the build. If you have any questions or suggestions, you can leave them in the comments. I try to get to them as soon as I can. If you want to support my work or connect with me and my community, you can check out my socials including Twitch, Discord and Patreon on my channel page or the description of this video. I hope you liked it. Until next time.